So in my opinion, it is the absolute perfect morning here in South Georgia. It's about 60 degrees. Um, Wind is pretty calm. Got a little breeze coming this way. I can feel it. Sun's up. Got in here just after daylight. Haven't seen anything all day except a squirrel back here, but that's fine. This is the upper swamp, but it is so dry in South Georgia that it ain't much of a swamp. We've got a little bit of water coming through the creek only because I unplugged the beaver pipe up there at the pond. So about a month ago, maybe about 6 weeks ago, the youngest boy went off to his what they call a senior retreat. I remember doing that when I was in Catholic school. It's kind of where you go off and, you know, they isolate you, you know, and of course now they take your phone and they put them into a situation where they're kind of out of touch with the world and not distracted. And somehow what they are attempting to do is to tap their souls, talk about God, talk about life, and get them to open their souls up. And I told him going into it, I said, hey, just go into it with an open mind. That's all. That's all I'm asking. I said, just give it a shot. So he went, and I think it was about a day after he got back, him and I had to go to North Georgia for a baseball tournament. And his mama couldn't go because she had to work on Friday. And so one of the advantages of being self-employed for the most part is I can alter my schedule to accommodate, you know, our boys' needs, which is kind of cool. So he piles in the truck with me, and normally he'll have his phone in one hand and, you know, baseball bats and all that junk and gloves, 14 different gloves. I don't get it. I don't understand it. He plays a lot of different positions, but I guess there's a glove for everything, but it's a lot different than when I played ball and all the different bats. But he piles all that junk in the truck, and right there on the center console, he slaps down a Bible. And I was like, you know, is he got it hollowed out like he's been in prison and there's contraband in there? You know, that's what I'm thinking. I don't say nothing about it. I just roll with it. We get to driving up the road, and he's talking about this and talking about that. And then pretty soon he cracks his Bible open and he starts reading it. And I was like, God dang, you know, that's pretty wild. So I asked him, I said, what's going on over there? And he said, man, Dad, he said, I went on that retreat and it clicked. It took a little bit, but it clicked. And he said, I got a connection with God that I've never had before. And I said, that's cool. I said, I'm proud of you. I said, but the trick is keeping that connection. And this video is not necessarily a religious video. It's not. What it's about is all of these programs, and it doesn't matter if it's senior retreat or you take a group of military veterans and put them in some isolated place like I've been, or first responders, take them to someplace isolated. It's getting the right environment to open up their soul. Now, in the case of the youngest boy, it had a little religious spin to it. But at the end of it, all of these programs, in my opinion, it doesn't matter what it's for or what it's about. It's having the right environment, the right setting, the right smell in the air to open up your soul. When Dr. Mitchell came up with critical incident stress management, which is what I'm trained in, and you have these different things that he came up with. And most people are very familiar with the debriefing, but there's a bunch of other things that he came up with. All of that is about getting someone's soul to open up And when you're in group settings, it's to get that person's soul and another person's soul. And pretty much, even at senior retreat, it's a group setting. And it's about one soul opening up and another soul opening up. And then you realize that you're all really not that different. That you all have anxiety, fear, self-doubt, insecurities, struggling with figuring out who you are, what you want to be. And then in the case of trauma, you realize that we all have our trauma. The key, nobody's really been able to figure this one out, is all of these programs are awesome when you're in that little world that you're in. And everything looks and smells right. You're a little isolated from the world. How do we maintain to keep our souls open once we integrate you back into the world? And that's like the magical thing that nobody's been able to figure out. In my opinion, no one's been able to figure that out. That's the struggle. The struggle is to originally open the door to your soul, and then once it's open, how do we keep it open when you come back into the world that caused it to close shut and get nailed and sealed, and it just stays closed? How do we keep it open? Or how do we get it to where it opens easier? That's the key. You know, as we progress forward with what we're doing, you know, we're looking at doing programs here in Georgia, not large scale, no. Programs in Missouri, programs in Utah. And that's really my focus, personally, on my level. I'm pretty sure that I can get a lot of folks to open up their soul. I really can, if I can get my hands on them. But the key is keeping it open and being able to open it years later. Because it's kind of like our go-to. If it gets really, really, really bad and ugly, we just close it up, bury it. So as that weekend progressed, he toted that Bible around. I was pretty impressed. I really was. So it's been, I think, about 6 weeks. And he stayed at the cabin with me last night, the youngest boy. And he told me last night, right before we went to sleep, he said, "Daddy, I'm not going to hunt in the morning." I said, "Oh, okay." I said, "What you doing?" He said, "I'm going to church." I said, "Okay." And that was that. So 6 weeks in running, right? Whatever happened on that weekend senior retreat, whatever they did, somehow cracked that door open. Now, he's an 18-year-old boy. I doubt seriously he's got a bunch of junk in there that he needs to keep that door closed. It's just kind of how we're wired. You know, it's hard to expose yourself. And he told me the stories of senior retreat and the people who got up and talked. And he was like, "Wow, Dad, it was wild. One person got up and talked, and another and another." So that's kind of how it works. You know, you always want to pay that one guy $1,000. "Hey, man, get up. I'm going to give you $1,000 to let it rip." And then everybody else is going to join in. I mean, it's kind of how it works. It's like jumping in jumping off a cliff into a river. Done that before, you know. The first guy jumps. Well, he didn't die. Hell, I'll jump too. And that's kind of how we see it, you know, in that little world that they set up for you. But the goal is that when our soul is opened up, that's how we keep it open. And that's the hard part. So that's what I got on this early Sunday morning when I'm not at church and my youngest boy is. I'm going to buzz you around. You sure as the hell wouldn't know it's a swamp because it's dry, but beautiful day. So I've been sitting here all morning looking at this tree over here. I'm going to zoom in on it. Cracks me up out here. You see how that tree is growing that direction? But then all those offshoots are trying to be normal. and grow up towards the sky. You see that out here in the woods. Something happened to that tree when it was younger. Something knocked the hell out of it, probably a hurricane. And it leaned over, but then all the limbs decided we still need to grow towards the sky. And then many times in life, it's kind of like us. We get the hell knocked out of us. But we know we're supposed to be going upward, not sideways. She's dry, boy. The whole swamp is dry. So who am I today? Well, I'm thinking whoever those folks were, and I know a few of them, that cracked open that boy's door to his soul. Yeah, I'd like to thank them. I really would. You know, if the environment's right, I really don't think it's that hard. It's just the environment. And as Dr. Mitchell always says, it's timing. And we tend to kind of figure things out if we got a few buddies alongside of us. So like that tree over there that I've been looking at all morning, I'm figuring one of them limbs said, nah, we don't need to grow that way. We need to grow this way. And then the rest of them chimed in and said, yeah, let's start growing that way because we're a tree. Trees grow up. They don't grow to the side. So that's who I am today. A guy trying to live a life like a tree that got the hell knocked out of it, and a guy who's seeking some significant inspiration from his youngest son, who has figured out how to keep that door open to his soul despite the static of life and the constant self-doubt that hits you when you're traveling your path. Y'all have a great day.